increasing pressure. Since then, the case of British national Ben Rogers being denied entry to Hong Kong in October raised further concerns, as reflected in the Foreign Secretary's public statement at the time and subsequent further evidence to the Foreign Affairs Committee.
My Lords, I'm grateful for that reassuring reply. Is the Minister aware that, according to the claims made by the Hong Kong and Chinese authority, it is an interference in the domestic affairs of China for a British parliamentarian to visit Hong Kong in order to make an assessment about progress on the joint declaration? Given the fact that the joint declaration is an international treaty lodged in the UN, which places responsibility on both sides to carry it out, will the Minister take this opportunity to strenuously reject that view and ensure that both the Hong Kong authorities and the Beijing authorities are duly notified?
Let me assure the noble lord, of course, I totally agree with his position that he's just articulated. Indeed, we're fully aware of the situation which arose with the noble lord's visit to Hong Kong, and in that regard I am sure he read with positive perspective the reply of my right honourable friend the Foreign Secretary, which very much restates the position as articulated by the noble lord. The UK remains, I assure the noble lords, committed to strengthening its relationship with China, but not to the detriment of the joint declaration, which remains strong as ever, as does our commitment.
Noble Lord Ashton said this is an international treaty, and in the debate in Westminster Hall yesterday, Mark Field said that we will continue to raise with the Chinese authorities our concerns, particularly with the Ben Rogers situation, but also the ongoing arrest, 28 last month. If we're going to continue to raise our concerns, isn't it about time that we escalated this so that the Prime Minister demands answers from China on these breaches of an international treaty?
As the noble lord may be aware, at the last G20 meeting, indeed, my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, did raise various issues in this respect, and in terms of the point he makes about escalation, he may also be aware on the issue of Ben Rogers. At that time, the Chinese ambassador to the UK was also summoned into the Foreign Office. I myself have directly met with Ben Rogers, as have other ministers, since this incident took place, and let me reassure the noble lord, indeed all noble lords, that we continue to use every opportunity, both bilaterally and through international fora, to raise the important issue of the international agreement which both countries are signatory to.
Mr. Rogers' case, what advice does the Minister give to other British citizens travelling on a bona fide passport who wish to go to Hong Kong? Should they simply go, or should they inquire first of the Chinese embassy whether their presence in Hong Kong is to be tolerated?
Well, my noble friend speaks from great knowledge of the area, but in answer specifically to his question, as he'll be aware, indeed all noble lords, that the issue of immigration remains very much in the hands of the special administrative region of Hong Kong, and our continued advice has not changed. British citizens should travel to Hong Kong as they do now.
My Lords, I declare an interest as a patron of Hong Kong Watch. Notwithstanding what the Noble Lord, the Minister, said in his welcome reply to the Noble Lord Ashdown, how does he respond to the Hong Kong Bar Association's assertion that the decision by the Chinese government to enforce mainland law at the new high-speed rail terminus in Hong Kong, and I quote, is the most retrograde step to date in the implementation of the basic law and severely undermines public confidence in one country, two systems and the rule of law? A fear, my Lords, reinforced by the imprisonment of Joshua Wong and Nathan Law, both of whom I have hosted here in your Lordship's house, and whose treatment is yet another sign that one country, two systems is morphing into one country, one system.
My Lords, the noble Lord is quite right to raise these issues, and of course, whilst the economic case that the Chinese have made for the high-speed rail link is clear, it is also important that the final arrangements are and remain consistent with the one country, two systems framework. We understand, of course, that the Hong Kong Bar Association as well as the Hong Kong Law Society have also raised concerns about the legal base for this proposal, and we continue to urge both the Chinese and Hong Kong Special Administrative Region to ensure that the agreement which stands with international recognition continues to be abided by.
Lords, for those of us who love Hong Kong and really appreciate the energy and the vitality of its people, will the government impress upon the Chinese government that the special position of Hong Kong and its prosperity depends upon the rule of law and its maintenance, and that anything that is done to undermine that, fortunately we still have an independent judiciary there, but anything that does undermine it is likely to ruin Hong Kong's prosperity in international trade and everywhere in the world.
Noble Lord is quite right, and I agree with him totally, and let me assure him that we continue to implore upon Chinese through the Chinese authorities through bilateral meetings, and indeed the Hong Kong authorities. The chief executive of Hong Kong, for example, visited last September, and in every meeting he had during the course of that, indeed my right honourable friend Sajid Javid visited Hong Kong in November last year, and during these times the very point that the Noble Lord makes about sustaining, strengthening and upholding the rule of law was made clearly to the Chinese authorities.
Hong Kong was a colony for many years, and in that time a large number of Hong Kong people served in the Navy and the Army. Some of those who served, many of them for quite long periods, now are not getting any special treatment in terms of trying to come to this country. Can I ask the Noble Lord the Minister, is this issue being looked at and dealt with within government, or is it just being pushed to one side?
The issue of those people who are resident in Hong Kong, as the Noble Lord may well be aware, is that those who are Hong Kong residents are granted special consular assistance if they're travelling to third-party countries. Indeed, they can visit the UK for up to a period of 6 months, and indeed we've seen recently many people in Hong Kong, including those with the special status that the Noble Lord raises. Indeed, the police is another area we're looking at, is to ensure that we can process their applications through the normal channels with the Home Office. But my understanding is there's now over 200,000 people resident in Hong Kong who do have British nationality, and those who don't, continue to have a process in place with the Home Office to look into their case individually. However, I would stress that it is a process of immigration which the Home Office does look at very closely to ensure that the rights and responsibilities are sustained and the rights of those seeking for British nationality is also protected.